Hello, my friends. I know that our attention spans are really short and overstimulated and bombarded these days. I just wanted to make a quick note. I made this video as short as I could, but I really did put a lot of care into it. Please watch it the whole way through. And the reason is that when I write these, there's often an overarching transmission of a message, something that's being communicated that can't quite be grasped by just watching a 2-minute increment of it. Just like when we watch a movie or a show or read a novel and say, what is this really saying over time? You kind of have to see the whole panorama in order to understand the context of what's being communicated. We can really only know fully if we know the whole thing. So please watch all the way through and share your thoughts. And just something curious to note, I've been finding my own thinking and practice have become more and more political lately because I think that we can't even start to talk about deepening practice without first stabilizing a culture that supports it. It becomes increasingly difficult to justify me sitting in a room quietly or going on retreat for a month when there are so many beings suffering and may not even have access to the same context that we might have for a practice like that. It's very clear to me that practice is more and more social and we need to bring everyone into that. And so we have to become more political. And so, in that vein, I'm kind of thinking about doing something like a Practice as Politics series where we explore how to be an engaged practitioner in this world. So, if that's interesting to you, please leave a comment, share it with friends, make your voice known because your interest will motivate my interest because I really just want this to be helpful to you. Today, I want to talk about what's happening in the world of human power and wealth through the lens of psychology. S'ils n'ont pas de pain, qu'ils mangent de la brioche. If they don't have bread, let them eat cake. Conventionally attributed to Marie Antoinette, the statement can actually be traced back to the composer and philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau. But the point is well taken. The blatant disregard of the super elites for the welfare of our shared society is nothing new. Rousseau wrote this 24 years before the French Revolution when Marie Antoinette was still only a child. It was attributed to her later. Nonetheless, the sentiment emerged in 1765. That means that 250 years apart, social dynamics repeat, and I'm going to tell you why. It's not because the super elites are evil sociopaths at their core, even though behaviorally many actually do end up acting that way. It's that they've gradually become dissociated from our shared reality. I'll start by sharing a personal story to illustrate what I'm talking about. And this is a story about ownership. Once upon a time, I was a young clinician working at a dual diagnosis clinic, which is a clinic that works with very severe mental health issues and co-occurring substance use. Now, I was promoted to wellness coordinator, which means that it was my role to oversee wellness programs for staff and also for the clients. I had started working out at a gym right across the street and was paying out of my own pocket whatever the monthly rate was for the gym at the time, 60 bucks, 70 bucks, I don't know. And I was going to the gym 2 or 3 times a week pretty diligently on my lunch hour. It felt really good. As I was working out at the gym, I thought to myself, well, what if in the role of wellness coordinator, I could actually bring this to the staff and to the clients at the clinic I'm working at? So I approached leadership and I said, hey, I have this idea. What if the organization, which purported itself to have values of caring for the wellness of its clients and its staff, actually subsidized a couple of gym passes so that other staff members could also go to the gym and other clients could just take those passes and go to the gym? It was kind of a long shot, and to my surprise, they actually said yes, to their credit. So I went in and I spoke to management at the gym and made it all happen. Now, what I want to bring your attention to is actually what happened the moment I was able to get free access to the gym covered by my employer. I stopped going. I had been going for 3 months when I was paying out of my own pocket, and then all of a sudden, when it became free, I stopped going. It was such a fascinating look at my own psychology, and I think the psychology of so many of us, that is that essentially it kind of has to hurt a little bit in order for us to continue to engage in a behavior that would otherwise be met with some apathy or some resistance from ourselves. Why did that happen? If I was working out when I was paying for it, and then all of a sudden now I could go for free, and the incentive or the motivation to go vanished like that overnight. I'm not joking. I just stopped going to the gym from then on. It's very sad. I think that happened because I stopped feeling a sense of ownership. What ownership did for me was create a healthy sense of stress. Not a lot of stress, not toxic stress, but enough stress so that the benefit of caring was not outweighed by the benefit of apathy. Once that stress point was taken off, I no longer had that incentive, that motivation, that little bit of pain, that little bit of discomfort to drive me forward with a behavior that ultimately I really wanted to cultivate for myself, but required a little bit of discipline and motivation. I think the same thing is happening for the ultra rich in this world. I don't think that they've stopped investing in their system. This is no longer their system. Now, we know that the rate of taxation for the ultra-rich has steadily and acceleratingly gone down since the Nixon era tax breaks. The brilliant YouTuber Xavi breaks this down in a really nice short that he has on his YouTube channel, which I'll post below. The proposed rationale that we've been fed, why we've essentially allowed this to happen, is that the rich got richer because they're smarter And because they're smarter, they can make better decisions than us with how to use their money. They know how to use their money. We don't really know how to use our money, so we need them to make decisions for us. Now, this phenomenon applies not just in the United States, but globally. There is now a transnational Brahminical caste whose god is money and whose prayers, whose worship is our taxes. And because they sit increasingly apart from us, inhabiting entirely different ecosystems of human experience, they don't feel the pain that we feel as our systems of social care degenerate. They just don't share our environment. Now, I probably don't need to go into why the rationale that the ultra rich know how to use their money and should therefore be exempt from feeding back into the social net, and we don't. I think we all know that that's bullshit. And most of us feel confident that we are no more or less capable of intelligent decision making than those who wield massive institutional power to do so. In fact, perhaps there's a certain way in which, because we've been kept outside of the corrupting influence of power, we may actually have a better perspective on what the world needs. Now, just a note before continuing. It's true that a country in which 60 million people vote for a pathologically demented, orange-skinned demon with an inclination towards hallucinatory narcissistic psychopathy may not be the most trustworthy masses of people. And MAGA America, this is for you. It's not because you're dumb, as many unhelpful liberals are yelling these days and want you to feel bad about yourself. It's not because you're dumb. It's because you've been brainwashed by a century of political decision-making that has systematically disenfranchised you while promising supremacy that never really arrives, and manipulated you over and over, selling you a dream generation after generation that never arrives through divisive and exploitive rhetoric and policy that capitalizes on your desperation to twist your mind and actions into decision-making that ultimately goes against your best interests, and those are the ones you love. It's not because you're dumb, you've just been manipulated. You've been got. And the problem, as many of us are talking about now, is education. How do we actually bring up an entire generation of humans to be intelligent, aware, active, benevolent participatories in the democratic process? Plato in the Republic pointedly criticizes democracy and points out the exact trajectory that we're experiencing now, which is to say that any society that is organized democratically but unable to adequately educate its citizenry becomes vulnerable to the rise of the demagogue, the political leader that emerges seeking support from the masses by appealing not to their rational intellect and their best interest, but their desires, their dissatisfactions, their prejudices and wounds, their fears, their amygdala, their stress response, in order to mobilize their pain with the support of their ignorance to accrue more power for themselves, thereby descending into tyranny. Plato writes this 2,300 years ago. We think the world has changed. People have changed, but we have not. Only the outer trappings of society look different. People are the same. And it's not a failing, it's just a logical byproduct of the fact that biology moves much slower than culture. It's taken humans 5 to 8 million years to split away from chimps, but less than 200 years to go from not having cars to the world we live in now. Pause for a second. Let that sink in. Biology moves slowly. It thinks and feels in spans of hundreds of thousands, millions of years, but culture thinks and feels in the time span of decades. And so culture can change much more quickly than our actual human organisms. Now, as usual, I don't like to just point things out. Theoretical physics is incredibly important, but its social power is translated through applied physics. They need to work hand in hand. So you might say, so what? Nice job, kiddo. You've described some important factors contributing to the emergence of the sociopathically disconnected, power-worshipping, neo-Brahminical global techno-elite. Now what do we do? Well, it might be a good idea to trace a syndrome with many different manifestations appearing throughout a vast spectrum of the human macro body, this global human culture that we inhabit, to its roots. Now, you may feel differently about this, and if so, I want to hear it, because I think that discourse and disagreement is actually the ground from which understanding and growth can happen. But to me, at its core, this is a manifestation of ignorance, which, yes, can become functionally indistinguishable from evil. Or perhaps we could say that what we call evil is in fact just the foremost manifestation of ignorance in a universe that is fundamentally wise in seeking to connect with its own wisdom and express its own wisdom. Think about that for a second. That means that in a dualistic frame, what is bad is only bad because it stands out or disrupts the background of goodness from which it emerges. Its presence becomes conspicuous. It's not integrated with the whole. And that's why I think the universe seeks to resolve evil. As many systems that seek homeostasis, it seeks to return back to baseline, and so seeks to resolve this state of evil, or ignorance. Now, imagine a room full of wise individuals having tea together. Or maybe it's a school environment with young children trying to learn something, full of hopes and dreams and aspirations and feelings and families who love them. They're hanging out, they're talking, being kind to each other. All of a sudden, they hear a commotion. A person has broken into the establishment and has begun killing people indiscriminately, seemingly for no reason, seemingly disconnected from any sense of their own humanity. We could and do call that behavior evil, just as we could call the mass pilfering of the earth and its inhabitants by a small group of self-interested humans evil. But it would only earn that label insofar as it transgresses the held principles of the room. Otherwise, we wouldn't consider it evil. In other words, bad actions in a bad universe would be considered good. That's what would make that universe bad in the first place. The fact that we call bad actions means the context is good, and that bad actions stand in contrast to that fundamental goodness. In either case, how do we remedy ignorance in the world if we can agree that it's at the root of many of the sufferings that we're seeing? Well, I don't know is a good, honest answer, and it's true, but I do know where to begin. By addressing ignorance within ourselves. And we have no tools more powerful than practice, which clears our minds, grounds our bodies, and opens our hearts, not just to beautiful aspects of our human experience, but also the difficult ones we must engage with in order to protect our home planet, which is our very body. This planet Earth is our body. We are little cells that crawl around it and breathe it and eat it and sleep on it and live in it. We are not separate. Collective awareness can only become a manifestation of individual awareness, and practice helps us make sense of what's happening, of reality, in a skillful way, just as good, sane, skillful action can really only emerge from a good, sane, skillful mind. And the tendency to externalize responsibility for that cultivation of the mind is ignorance operating on itself, thinking, oh yes, that thing out there, that needs to change, versus, ooh, this thing in here, this thing needs to change. I often think of wisdom as encompassing a capacity to turn attention inward, to begin to notice oneself operating in one's social environment, and to begin to accurately notice one's impact on that environment, so as to begin to impact it differently, more beneficially, in a way that's helpful, which I just define as whatever brings suffering down, instead of unhelpfully, which I just define as anything that brings suffering up. Krishna says to Arjuna as he explains the heart essence of the practice of yoga in the Bhagavad Gita, yoga is skillfulness in action. It is compassion moving through the world, changing what it touches, easing suffering, cultivating and manifesting the causes of all virtue, peace, happiness, and fulfillment. Now, the Gita, of course, comes from India, Great Mother India, who has brought this world so many gifts. But she's also complex. She's also been the home of a horrific, dehumanizing caste system for literally thousands of years. And it's easy to point to it and say, phew, at least that's a problem we don't have to deal with. But I regret to inform you that our caste system is no less profound or obvious. And I would encourage you in whatever large city you probably live near to go to your closest methadone mile or whatever boulevard or neighborhood your city has reluctantly surrendered to those disenfranchised by our culture who haven't been able to keep up with the constant onslaught of traumatic requirements and have nowhere else to go, thereby becoming visible to the rest of us who uncomfortably behold their own suffering as trying to survive and stay afloat in our own lives. Now, in the Indian caste system, social classes are organized in a hierarchy that are traditionally associated or likened to a human body. The Brahmins, the highest caste of teachers and priests, are, of course, the head. The Kshatriyas, the warriors, are the arms. The powerful wield and enforce their control through a monopoly on violence. Sound familiar? The Vaishyas, that's probably many of us, if we're fortunate, are the farmers, the traders, the merchants. They are the thighs and stomach. We take everything the head eats and enjoys and digest it for them. We don't quite get to taste the delicious food they eat, but we'll gratefully digest whatever they spit down at us when they're done chewing it. But this is still the global upper middle class, white-collar folk. Most of the world are actually laborers or shudras, the legs, without which none of our social apparatus could really go anywhere. This is the blue-collar workers, the people who render our lives most livable and get the least recognition for it. And by the way, thank you for keeping our streets clean and keeping our gardens beautiful and keeping our homes organized and keeping our grocery stores stocked. I appreciate you very dearly. And of course, the Dalits, who aren't even a part of the social body, rendering them not human. Now, contrary to what this analogy of the Dalits as not being a part of the social body, I think they're actually one of the most important parts of the social body. I think they are in front of us, looking back on us, reminding us of exactly what can happen to us if we stop running fast enough so this global machine doesn't gobble us up and shit us out onto the streets riddled with mental health issues and the issues of addiction necessary to psychologically survive systematic dehumanization and the mass relocations of humans who can no longer afford financially, energetically, psychically, socially to continue to function in our culture. I also think this applies to individuals with psychosis, schizophrenia, bipolar, and all of the other labels that the contemporary mental health establishment uses to describe people who are pathologically unwell. I actually think they are our prophets. They are showing back to us the ways in which our environment is dysfunctional. And unlike those of us who are able to compartmentalize and numb and dissociate and sublimate, they have lost the ability to function, thereby showing us the ways in which our culture has lost the ability to function. Now, since we've seen how uncanny the accuracy of this analogy is to describe our social fabric in the United States, let's look at what happens when a person inhabits some of these castes long enough. Now, just go with me here. The head directs action. It tells the rest of the body where to go. The head also sees, hears, and tastes the phenomenal world. So the body pursues that which is appealing to the sensory apparatuses of the head. Now, I want to talk about what connects the head to the rest of the body, which is a very important thing we're going to talk about today, the neck. Now, the neck is important for many reasons, but primarily two reasons. First, it conveys information to the body from the head, instructions, if you will, through the spinal cord and the nervous system. It also provides sustenance through the supply of food, water, internet, electricity, safety by the means of military protection racket, oxygen, and it does so by the means of this little bridge we call the neck. Now, this makes the neck perhaps the single most important and vulnerable part of the human body. It is the body's Strait of Hormuz. And why, and we'll get back to this later, during the French Revolution, tolerating chronic and degenerative social dehumanization of the masses was out, and chopping heads of the rich was in. I think you couldn't have found a better metaphor for the social dynamics of the time. Now, I want you to imagine for a moment that the neck, the bridge, the supply chain, begins to elongate from 3 inches or so to maybe a foot. But let's keep going. Let's extend it to 3 feet, 20 feet, 300 feet, 2,000 feet, past the cloud line, 7,000 feet, 30,000 feet. Now, I want you to imagine this strange being. And by the way, I attached an infographic that's really beautiful from Eat the Rich to give a little bit of a sense of scale, because it's really hard, if not impossible, for the human mind to grasp really just how long the neck separating the head from the body has become. Now, imagine this being hobbling along, its immensely long, snake-like neck surveying the world from above, licking its lips, deciding what to consume next, and ordering the body in that direction. Now, incidentally, switching cosmologies here for a moment, that's an exact description of hungry ghosts, one of the 6 hell realms of Buddhist iconography. Beings with stomachs vast as mountains and a pencil-thin neck that cannot properly swallow, digest, or derive nutrition from anything it eats, leaving it in a perpetual state of insatiable hunger. Make of that what you will. Now, if that head spends enough time at that altitude, looking through those eyes and being in that relationship with its environment, it may very well begin to forget that it is dependent or even a part of the body which sustains it. How could it be? It's so free up here, it moves uninhibited through the skies, flying like a god, really, above the world's domains. It begins to forget how it is down on the ground, down in the mud with all those mosquitoes and rats and scary, smelly things. It may truly come to forget its connection and what it owes to the body. This snake-like head may begin to develop an understandable but ultimately very problematic sense of grandiosity as it dissociates itself from the body it belongs to. I am above the world. I have mastered the universe. I reshape the earth in my image and pleasure. Those tiny little beings are inferior to me. Now, at an individual level, I've already named that practice is the most important foundation we can develop as individuals to wake up to what's actually happening around us and give rise to the level of vitality and energy and connectedness and insight that we're going to need to begin to address the real social issues. At a collective level, I believe that any institutionalized impediment, without exception, to direct individual power is an impediment to global democracy. In the United States, we have something called the Electoral College, which was partly crafted in response to the practical impossibility of a national popular vote across a largely illiterate, geographically dispersed population and critically, as a compromise to get slaveholding states on board, which the North really needed for their economic power, allowing them to keep their electoral power without, according to the Three-Fifths Compromise, giving any enslaved people any actual social or political power. Fast forward to a 2016 election in which Trump lost the popular vote by 3 million people. For context, the population of, say, Norway is 5.5 million people. 3 million people, if it were a country, would be right around in the middle of the 195 recognized sovereign nations on this planet. And even though 3 million people disagreed, he still won. The insanely and obviously unethical practice of artificially redrawing electoral district boundaries for political gain, the ultra-rich tax evasion schemes which have accumulated over the past few decades, which have functionally created an entire separate parallel economy that we are not a part of and we do not know about. It functions as a kind of exclusive social club where they socialize production using the economy that we live in to generate wealth and power with our labor and our attention, and then funnel it out of this economic system and into their parallel economy, where the power and money then circulate. And then you say, but according to this system, we've left it to their discretion to then put the money back into social systems that benefit the rest of us, right? Because we've been working really hard for them. But that's actually not what happens. They don't need to worry about the lack of education and infrastructure, childcare, healthcare. They fly in private jets and never rub shoulders with the peasants. They don't need to worry about fuel shortages like we do. They send their kids to private schools where they meet other kids like them. They form their own banks, so-called family offices, and regulate their own tax codes. They have their own private doctors. And I've seen this directly in the field of mental health, where if I belong to that social class and I don't want my kid to wait 6 months for a neuropsychological assessment or something, I could just pay a private psychiatrist $10,000 and they'll see him next week. They have their own chefs, while 50 million Americans live with food insecurity. That home you can't afford to buy it because of people like Donald Brehm, who you've maybe never heard of, who have real estate portfolios worth billions of dollars and no incentive whatsoever to sell them to the likes of you and me, when they can just keep harvesting rent money and benefiting from the rising prices of real estate. The fact that we can track individuals down when they're trying to raise their family without hurting anyone, contributing to the social ecosystem, contributing to the economy through their labor in this country without the proper legal status, without papers that give them the right to live on soil that ultimately actually belongs to no one, or that we can chase down conscientious objectors to incarcerate them if they want to dodge a military draft because they don't want to participate in a war that they want nothing to do with, or that the IRS can hunt you down when it comes to paying taxes in order to fund those wars, but you're not allowed to vote from home on your computer. If you're disabled or working multiple jobs or just want the convenience to be able to exercise your right to vote because of your status as a citizen, not because of your capacity to locomote yourself to a voting booth and present a plastic ID. We should be able to vote and at least have a say in warfare policy, in nuclear dearmament, in regulatory oversight of industries such as the tech industry that, if they don't have oversight and oversee themselves, have absolutely no incentive to keep our best interests in mind. And it's not just big tech. Big pharma, big meat, big auto, big fossil fuel, big politics. The thing that ties them together is the institutional power that they wield over the rest of us. Maybe we should just ban lobbying completely. All these big interests, big, 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 big. What about small interests? What about you and me? What about our neighbors? What about ranked choice voting, which is so superior to the system that we currently have in place, where we're forced to swing from one side to the other in a bipolar manner, rather than have voices that come from both sides making decisions together? Like, maybe we don't need one president. Maybe that office is too much power for one person. Maybe we need like 2 or 3 presidents that keep each other in check, or even crazier, a council of elders that make decisions together. But sometimes one person needs to make a decision very quickly. Yeah, those are exactly the kinds of decisions where perhaps it's best to take a beat, slow down, and take a breath. Maybe something like a council of elders can actually help us slow down so we're thinking before we're acting, rather than acting, making messes, and then acting more to clean those messes without having thought, thereby making more messes for us to act on. Maybe we should have participatory budgeting at a federal level. In Cambridge, Massachusetts, participatory budgeting is such a powerful way to make community members feel like their votes, their voice actually matter. They make investments in the arts, they make investments in the infrastructure that directly impacts them every day. And all of these issues are systemic. And until we change the systems, they're going to continue to optimize for what they've been optimizing. Okay, if you invite me to a soccer game and I show up, there are boundaries and parameters within which I can play, and that's still called soccer. And outside of those boundaries and parameters, I can no longer call it soccer. I could say, well, can I kick the ball with my right leg? Yup. Can I kick the ball with the left leg? Yup. Can I grab the ball with my hand and bounce it on the floor and shoot it through a hoop? No, that's no longer soccer. Now that's basketball. And there's a hard edge to what these systems can optimize for. At a certain point, we need to start to think about if we keep getting the same results playing the game that we've been playing, maybe what we need is a different game. And why is it so hard to change it into a different game? Because at this point, we've entered a game in which the thresholds and the parameters and the system itself is optimized in a way that we actually can't win. And you know what's really dangerous to people with a lot of money and a lot of institutional power? Power that comes from outside of those frames. Relationship, creativity, practice, kindness, generosity, mental wellness, and fortitude. In an insane system, sanity is perceived as insane by definition. How would it be if we started actually subverting the inherited social order, which demands that we keep our heads down, focusing on survival for just ourselves and our immediate loved ones in a state of servile self-pursuit, and instead started looking around and started to help each other, rather than those who hold our attention through the techno chains that keep us bound? All of these things that I mentioned are things that we need to start to vote into law at a structural level, not because they support the party we've been indoctrinated into, but because they support the cultivation of systems that empower all of us. And that feeling of ownership that I said, yeah, but what if we give those 60 million people who voted for Trump the same level of agency? Why wouldn't they have a sense of agency? Then maybe they feel a sense of ownership over their country. Maybe they're really angry because they've slowly seen their sense of ownership slip out of their hands, same as the left. Maybe if I have a sense that I own the home, I'm more incentivized to care for it. Go back to the gym analogy. So we need to start to change these things at a structural level. We need to vote, we need to mobilize, we need to get active because they support the cultivation of a system that empowers us. And that word cultivation is extremely important because this system that we're in isn't an accident. It has been cultivated for the past 50 years. So if we want it to change, no, it's not going to change tomorrow, but it will require long time cultivation for the change to manifest over time. Unfortunately, it has come to a point where we can no longer get hyped or really even overly reactive to the latest tragedy. There's too many to count now. They are a given in the world that we live in. Rather than reactively glob onto the latest one, given the pace at which they're coming out, we need to start absorbing them with more equanimity, unfortunately, and doing whatever we need to sustain attention for decades, to work together for decades, to push back for decades, not just the latest news cycle, not just the latest election cycle. Our institutional memories are too short and we need to expand them so that our children, if we keep having them, because I know many people who are so terrified of the world we're living in that they actually don't want to have children anymore, can be proud of us so that they can be grateful to us for what we have given them, rather than look back on us with appropriate and adequate disgust and bitterness and resentment, all accurate responsive to collective cowardice and apathy. If you don't know how to help, learn. If you don't know what to do, ask. Stop feeling like you need to be the one to make the big change that'll save us all. Start to recognize that the body of the Buddha, that the body of Christ, that enlightened, compassionate awareness in this world is not going to take the form of one Messiah, one Savior. It's going to take the form of all of us coming together in a shared fabric of cohesiveness. Maybe we need to have different perspectives in government. Maybe we need to have a spiritual perspective in government or multiple spiritual perspectives. Maybe we should have actually qualified voices, imams, Sikh leaders, Buddhist leaders, Christian leaders, actually advising and being part of those decisions that are being made, part of the moral and ethical infrastructure of how we operate as a society of multiplicity and plurality. Maybe we should have a mental health perspective on the situation. Maybe some people are not fit for being president of the so-called free world. Maybe there needs to be an age cutoff. But where are those voices? They're drowned out by the likes of Big Petrol and Big Meat and all of those who have immense lobbying power to actually sway the course of our culture behind the scenes. And Big Petrol, by the way, I'm looking at you. Enjoy your last breaths, okay? Because you're grasping at any shreds of power and clawing whatever you can for yourself. And I know why you're doing it. It's because you know that you're on your last legs in a world in which you are clearly bound for extinction. We don't want a filthy oil society anymore. It was a skillful means to get us where we are now, and now we don't need it. Now we can drop it. We don't need you. Now we want to invest heavily in renewable energies that can give accessible energy to everyone at all times while also slowing down the rate at which we are defiling the biosphere. Like, are these ideas really so radical? We just sent people into orbit around the moon. And incidentally, found out that the moon is actually iridescent on its dark side, which is incredible. But what are we really afraid of? Is it really just change? Because if so, reminder that change is the medium we and all of our ancestors have been swimming in since forever. We are pros at change, but we're acting like kindergartners who can barely even hold a pencil. We are PhD level change beings. We have survived immense levels of change. Just ask our chimp ancestors 5 million years ago, blink of an eye, universal scale, and look at us now. But it's like we've surrendered all control over the change process. If we don't cultivate and prune the garden will grow out of control. It needs our engaged participation.
It's impossible.
No, it's not. The status quo benefits those who oppose its transformation and who also coincidentally have managed to consolidate all the decision-making power. Now, these are just a few of the kinds of systematic changes that we need to start making yesterday, not next week, not next month, not a year from now, yesterday, 2 years ago, 10 years ago, now, because the Dalits, those who don't have homes, might have very different priorities from those who have 16 homes. Those of us who are struggling to pay for our groceries or our heat in the winter may have very different valid perspectives on what our culture needs that are perhaps not available to those who, say, own a fleet of luxury cars or haven't felt the pinch of stress around paying taxes in a long time because they don't pay them. And the bipartisan debate in the United States of America keeps us pitted against one another. And that, I believe, is intentional. While issues of tertiary importance receive our endless attention, contention, and debate, these primary issues, these secondary issues, go unaddressed. Not to mention the fact that all of us must begin to value political candidates who bring ecological policy as well as social reform to the forefront of their policymaking, not as an afterthought. These are issues we need to bring our attention to now. But this economy will slow down. Good. We need to slow down because I think we all know where we're rushing to if we don't. Speed of growth for an infinitesimally small fraction of the social body cannot be our sole or maybe even any kind of metric for success or global growth. We can only move as fast as our slowest movers. We can only jump as high as our lowest jumper. The health of our society, the metric for success, is how we care for those of us who have least power, not how we care for those who have most power. The metric for success is how we tend to our earth, how sustainable she is, not how much we can extract from her today. Now, in my household, I have a saying. As I raise a child who receives subsidized support to attend a wonderful private school that offers him community and support in the social emotional development that's so important for our children, as well as his academic development, so that he can mature and ripen as a whole person, so that as a foundation, he doesn't know how to just regurgitate facts, he knows himself. He has a sense of justice. He has a sense of being properly oriented to the moral complexities of society. But he's surrounded by levels of wealth that are not his level of wealth. And so I say to him often, privilege comes with responsibility. And so I say to you, those who wield the power, who have the means of production, privilege comes with responsibility. Responsibility without privilege culminates in slavery. That's what many humans throughout history have experienced, and I think in some form that's what many of us are experiencing. We are in indentured servitude, without means of escaping the system that keeps us in a state of indentured servitude, forced to perform tasks and engage and use our time and energy in ways that we would otherwise wish not to in order to survive in it. Responsibility without privilege culminates in slavery. Privilege without responsibility culminates in entitlement. You see how those two interact, right? Now, at this point, I do not give a shit if there are billionaires who have become so hollowed out by the life they have cultivated to themselves and so totally disconnected to what is true, nourishing, and important that they feel they need to buy a $500 million yacht. I really don't. But I do care if we're going to choose not to put a cap on wealth, which we really should consider. What if anything above Musk's first $20 billion, do you think he needs more than $20 billion, went to education, infrastructure, healthcare? What I do demand is financial transparency. and an interruption to the process by which they can use hundreds of millions of dollars, which we do not have even collectively, to influence the course of political outcomes. And what I do demand for those who do have that level of disproportionate wealth generated by us is the fiduciary responsibility towards those who generate the wealth through their labor from those who harvest it. Privilege comes with responsibility. And I'm not interested in your privilege, sirs, madams, but I do want what's owed to all of us, which is our basic rights: health, human dignity, education, food, shelter, and so forth. We who have sacrificed our precious life force to construct systems that disproportionately, sirs and madams, benefit you. Now, if I seem angry, I am. And I don't need to settle down. As I've been told much of my life, I need to see change. Real, not performative change. For the intelligence of my nervous system to tell me, okay, now you can stop being angry. Now there's actually no reason to be angry. This, again, is how practice can help us. It can help us change our relationship with the emotional experiences we're having so that we're not just numbing and suppressing them like much of our behavioral mental health system wants us to do, so that we can really truly recognize, in the words of the great Jiddu Krishnamurti, that it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And that in fact, all of these feelings we're having, our grief, our rage, our confusion, our despair, our helplessness, our doubt, are very sacred. They are manifestations of intelligence and compassion, and furthermore, manifestations of our interdependence with our relational environment, not just with humans, but non-human beings, and the earth itself, which also is alive. Only through practice can they be harnessed for skillful, not destructive or reactive use. So anyway, just wanted to share those thoughts. Reminder, apropos of nothing, that Rousseau wrote that quip, "May they eat bread," 24 years before the French Revolution. So, billionaires, don't wait too long to get your act together. I do believe I hear the people sharpening their guillotines. And I genuinely despise violence and bloodshed in any of its forms. And for the rest of us, vote. Not just politically, but energetically, attentionally, with how you use your time, how you use your mind. Not just to complain about what's going wrong in the world, but to become part of what's going well in the world. Reclaim your attention. Use your free time to become active in local government or your school's parent-teacher association. Start conversations with friends, or even better, enemies, and begin to find common ground. What do you actually agree on? I think all of us want our kids to be healthy, safe, and educated. Don't just use your free time to binge watch 3 seasons of Peaky Blinder. I see you. Volunteer at a homeless shelter. Start bringing communities together. Start bringing a little trash bag with you when you go for a walk so you can pick up the litter that you see. Cast off your self-conscious reluctance to be seen operating differently in social systems that need you to operate differently but keep you complacent and compliant. Use the stillness of your meditation practice to get skillfully loud. Skillfully loud, not reactively loud. Don't perpetuate violence. Inform yourself and help inform others. Make dope art that can inspire people by example. Work less if you can, not more. So you can spend time taking care of yourself, socializing, reading, walking in nature, learning the clarinet, and teaching your kids that grown-ups can and do pick up instruments and learn new skills, and that the journey of learning is a lifelong one, not just something that's experienced as you become 3D printed into a good worker bee by our social education systems. Teach them self-love and self-investment by example. Teach them community by example. They need to see you in relationship, loving, caring, deep relationship with other people. That's how they learn. They're watching all of us. They're feeling all of us. Use your privilege to help those who don't have the privilege you embody. Man, advocate for not man rights. Middle class human, advocate for basic universal human rights of not middle class humans. If you have the means, if you're rich and one of the good guys, help us. Give us the spaces where we can gather. Give us time so we can think and organize. Feed us so we can engage in economic embargoes that truly cause a pinch. Help us stop working and start protesting, not for a day, for a year, if that's what we need. Help us reclaim what you will soon lose. And most importantly to all of us, let us practice, not just individually, sitting on a meditation cushion, but in groups. Dancing and moving together to metabolize our suffering, speaking together to metabolize our thinking, acting together to metabolize our motivation to give us strength, sitting together to co-regulate our nervous systems, because that will give us the strength and clarity we need to overcome the immense obstacles that we face. If you enjoyed this video, please share and subscribe. Consider becoming a patron. Some of what I would do with the money would be to increase the output and quality of these videos by hiring video editors. And I'd also like to start potentially one day translating these videos into different languages as a gesture against the Anglocentrism and a nod towards the importance of cultivating our global togetherness. May you and all beings enjoy happiness in its causes. May you and all beings, including the neo-Brahmanical techno-overlords, be free from suffering and its causes. May this channel self-destruct.